certificates at the end that you can take with you, so then that'll cover you for the year on that. Annual MUI training is going to be your basic. I have to go through the rule. You have to do this every year, so I know this should be repeat for everybody, which is a good thing. And then I would like to talk about like any of the hot topics that you would like. I want to talk about financing, money management, if that may apply to you, it may not. But so we'll kind of go through the rule just because we have to. MUI, I think, does anybody not know what an MUI is? By chance? Anybody not know? Major unusual incident. Those are the ones that I investigate, that I have to look into because there's health and safety related. That it may be your abuse, it may be health, just the hospitalizations or whatever, but it's an administrative investigation. I'm not a law enforcement officer. I don't do children's services, so I have to utilize them when that applies. It's anything that actually happens, you think it happened, suspected it, does not matter. We still have to report them, and I still have to look into them. The whole idea what I do, the whole reason I do what I do is prevention planning. How can we prevent it from happening again? Putting that plan in place, usually the state looks at that prevention plan, and I have to be very specific and verify that that was put in place. So it's kind of like the reason why we do what we do, identifying why it happened and how can we prevent it. 3 categories of MUIs. They changed this a few years ago where I have categories now. It used to be protocol and non-protocol. Protocol were those ones that, the big ones, the abuse, neglect, which still are big ones. Are category A, but I need to use children's services and I need to use law enforcement because they're criminal. Those ones, I usually do their joint ones, and then B's, I do them all, just myself, and then C's, I can utilize, which I don't do it this way, but I can say the SSAs can just give me the information, but that doesn't make much sense because they don't always know everything that we need. So those are just the lower ones. So that's going to be unapproved behavior sport and hospitalizations and law enforcement. These are those categories. There's actually 19 categories technically that would file. So these are all the A's, and that really doesn't matter, the C's. Physical abuse, I think we all know what that is. Again, it does not have to actually have caused harm. We don't have to have injury. If it could have caused injury, then it's going to be a physical abuse MUI. It does not matter if law enforcement takes it or not. I will still look into it if I think that it potentially could have resulted in physical harm. Sexual abuse, anything unlawful, and again, this is going to have to be reported to law enforcement. Again, whether they take it or not doesn't mean that I can't investigate it and look into it. Verbal abuse, anything that's coercive, intimidating to the individual, humiliating. A lot of times we may think, oh, well, they didn't understand, they didn't know what was being said to them, so it doesn't matter. It still matters. It does not matter how that individual felt or how they reacted, because honestly, we really don't know. And that used to be something what was in the rule. Okay, well, if they weren't affected, we don't have to file it. But we can't say that. We don't know how that affects that person. So these ones, communicative means, so we have the Facebook and all that other stuff. We have filed them just based on how people are communicating with them on Facebook or whatever, too, that can constitute verbal abuse just as well. Well, I don't think I've ever had law enforcement take a verbal abuse MUI, unless it's truly menacing, where they're saying, I'm going to hurt you if you don't do this, that sort of thing. So usually this is one that I'm doing on my own. Misappropriation, we'll talk more about kind of the finances and money at the end, but depriving, defrauding, stealing, that sort of thing, the amount doesn't matter. If I know that somebody took $5 from the individual with the intent to take it, it's a felony no matter what. And we've actually prosecuted them as low as $25, and they've had a felony on the record for that. So that's an advantage for keeping people from theft, but I just don't think that sometimes staff really understand that it's not worth it. I mean, we're talking little amounts of money that people are stealing, and it's automatically a 5th-degree felony regardless of the amount. So, and that includes property, anything of that matter. Neglect, when there's a duty to do so. So I've taught you this before, so if you're just the transportation, your duty isn't about their medication. If they didn't get their medication, you're not on the hook because they didn't get it that day. It's what you are supposed to be providing. So whether that be supervision, whatever that might be. Anytime that anybody chokes, I'll look to neglect first to make sure their diet was followed, that they weren't giving pizza when they should have puree diet, that sort of thing. And again, it has to have a reasonable risk of harm. It does not have to have injury, but if that could have resulted in harm, I will file neglect on those. Exploitation, using a person's resources for personal gain. The best example I like to use is that if you're selling like 31 or something like that, and you have the individual buy a bunch of stuff, they get the stuff, you're not stealing from them, but you're gaining from it. We don't really have that situation as much anymore where people, staff or people providing services would put themselves on their cell phone bill and stuff like that because they get unlimited minutes, so they're not actually paying for it or losing money, but they're gaining from their resources. So all those things that you know can happen with peer-to-peer, it's just a different category. So one peer, two individuals that are being served, one peer can physically abuse another peer. We just categorize them as peer-to-peer acts. And so it has, the difference in that is there has to be at least be a $20 value. So if someone steals $10 from someone, not that it's still not criminal, we can still report it to children or to law enforcement, but we can help rectify that situation without involving law enforcement and exhausting them. When I first started in 2002, it used to be for a piece of gum, a pop, anything. Technically, we had to call law enforcement every time they took a Reese cup from somebody or whatever, and that was, obviously, they're not going to take us seriously when we have to report that stuff. So that changed probably I think in 2009, where the lease has to be $20 or something of value to that person. So if it was their most valued hat, and it meant so much to them, we'll still file peer-to-peer because we want to prevent that. We want to. It doesn't change just because it's not filed as an MUI. Does it change the way we should act to it? Where prevention planning still the same. Physical acts. That one gets a little technical. There has to be significant injury, unless it's the neck or face. Any choking, no matter if there's injury or not, any kind of act of choking is going to be a peer-to-peer physical abuse because obviously choking they feel is more targeted and more intense. Bloody nose, bloody lips, anything on the face, scratches, things like that. I like to review them, so anytime you have a peer-to-peer, I still like to look at them just to make sure we need to rule them out if we need to. But significant injury is going to be anything that requires a physician or a nurse to look at them or nurse practitioner. Peer-to-peer verbal. I'm getting more and more of these again because of the Facebook and the social media stuff, that stuff going back and forth between individuals. But they have to have the ability and the opportunity to follow through with that threat. So if there's somebody that says, I'm going to come over and shoot you because I'm mad at you, do they really have the ability and the means to do that? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Peer-to-peer sexual. Prohibited sexual relations. Any of us in this room cannot have an intimate type of relationship with an individual that gets services. It's happened many times. You just say don't do it because it's not prohibited. Now this wouldn't be against the law technically because if someone's able to consent, that's not saying that they can't consent. They can. It's just the DD rule prohibits that from happening. So that could get you on the abuser registry as well as not working in the field anymore. Rights code violation. It has to have a health and welfare attached to it. So not letting somebody go to church because you don't like Catholics, that's not okay. You're violating their rights, but there's probably not a health and safety unless they got really upset and started banging their head against the wall. Rights code violations often happen. I often file the verbal abuse. Like I say, it started off as a verbal abuse. They were just being nasty and mean. A lot of times they'll end up as rights code violations because our individuals should be treated with dignity and respect. We shouldn't. They have the right to be free from that. So a lot of times I'll file, they'll end up as rights code violations. Failing to report something, that can be criminal if you don't report something that put the person at risk. We're mandated reporters. We have to report whether we think that it's true or not. We have to report it every time, and if we don't, that could be a failure to report. Unapproved behavior sports. We can't put our hands on individuals. We shouldn't. I mean, there's times that we need to, and that's okay. If somebody is they're putting themselves at risk, and there's nothing else that you can do other than to hold their hands down or prompt them to stop, you need to show that you've tried other things first, not just going straight to that. Obviously, anytime we put our hands on somebody, there's a risk for us and them. So just making sure that we're following those rules and reporting them. Though people think that it's a bad thing, it's not. It's the only way really to get that in the plan if they need it in the plan, but obviously the object is to not have it in the plan, to not have those restraints anymore. Missing individual. I honestly don't have a whole lot of these anymore, but anytime an individual will be gone longer than maybe their plan states, or maybe we think that they're at risk. So we have an individual, the last one, that they filed it missing because he has no unsupervised time because he has a condition of like Prader-Willi. So the risk is that he'll go to a dumpster and eat food. I don't think that he's missing. He has pedestrian skills. He's able to access the community. Like, it's fine. He's not a risk. That's not putting him at a health stage. We feel like it might be a risk because he might be violating his diet, and he used to rummage through the dumpsters, but that doesn't mean he's missing. We shouldn't be necessarily needing to call police because we don't think that he's at risk to himself other than something like that. So just because the plan states they should only be gone unsupervised for 2 hours doesn't necessarily mean they're at risk. You know, looking for them would be good, that's fine. Looking for them, alerting the county board, the crisis line, that sort of thing, and making those attempts. But until maybe it's getting dark and they've been gone for 5 hours, okay, now we're getting worried. He's not normally done this before. So we want to call police anytime we need them, but trying to use those resources without running after, saying they're missing when they're not really at risk. Attempted suicide. We have individuals that make threats all the time. They want to kill themselves with a plastic fork, or whatever it might be, but they're really not making that true attempt, or they're just scratching themselves. Those aren't considered real attempts unless they need to go to the hospital and they're admitted, that sort of thing. So I don't look into them otherwise. Law enforcement, anytime someone is arrested, incarcerated, or charged with something, we file those every time, regardless if they're getting services. We want to make sure that they're represented in court. They need any assistance with that. We file those. Medical emergencies. That's CPR, IV for dehydration. It has to be specifically said in the discharge that it's dehydration. Not just because they get an IV, because anytime you go to the hospital, pretty much the standard to get an IV, it has to be specific to dehydration, because they consider that life-saving. Then your Heimlich, back blows, EpiPen, anytime you use those will be medical emergencies. Significant injuries, anything, there's specific things that's concussions, broken bones, fractures, stitches, has to be 5 or more. That hasn't changed. 2nd or 3rd degree burns, and I just had one the other day, but technically a blister of any, that's a 2nd degree burn. So if they're smoking and then they get a blister, that's technically a 2nd degree burn, and I filed those many times. And prevention planning is hard because you can't tell them to wear like a glove or something when they're smoking, but it is just looking at that. I've had people, hot coffee, they've dropped on their foot and it's been huge blisters. Just making sure that we're reporting that blister part of it, because that is a 2nd degree burn, even if it is small. Anything that's immobilized or casting, it used to be ACE bandages were considered immobilizing, but that's not. So just make sure you're reporting those and we can determine if they are or not. Hospitalizations, anytime they go into the hospital for anything that's not planned. So if it's scheduled, gallbladder removal, that's not an MUI, but anything that's not planned. Anytime somebody dies, and I'm not investigating the death, I'm not going to the, I'm communicating with the coroner if there is an autopsy, trying to get that report just to show that the state needs all that information. An accidental death, I actually just had my first accidental death, because I do MUIs with Clearwater Cog, contracted through the county board to do some of them too. So we had one, probably the first accidental death in Ottawa County, but it wasn't because of staffing, it was because of surgery. He went in for a PICC line, G-tube, just to be replaced. He already had one, had replaced, and his esophagus was lacerated, and they went to pull it out, and there was a condition where the air will go in between the tissues, and within hours he passed away. So it was obviously an accidental death. That's sad. Reporting requirements, I know we have some with the ICF that, I mean, they're pretty much the same. Within 24 hours by the next business day, you need to report that. There are the 4-hour requirements for that abuse, neglect, anything that could be criminal. We need to know about that right away. We can't wait because we got to make sure we involve law enforcement, that sort of thing. So I think everybody knows the hotline number and utilize that well. If you don't, it's right there on the bottom there. Incident reports, making sure you're writing the incident reports as soon as you can. Don't wait. Write them up that day, send them out, and then I think everybody knows that procedure. If not, then let me know about that. Those are your 4 hours. So again, it's the abuse, neglect, misappropriation, anything criminal. We need to make sure we're reporting within 4 hours of the allegation. Your incident reports are going to cover those notifications if you are the one, and I really want to encourage that. I think it's still lacking that. So if TRIPS has an incident report and they're sending it to the county board, TRIPS needs to be sending it to their other providers that you know too. Like, so they know when Ruth is their provider, making sure you're sharing that with all the providers. Some people have 4 different providers. If they have a transportation provider, a day program they go to, and a different residential work. So really making sure that they all have that, because everybody serves that person and everybody kind of needs to know what's going on. It's important to know that they fell at work, regardless if they're transporting them and they have nothing else to do with them, making sure you are sharing that with all the other ones. I try to catch it because I look at every single incident report that comes in. Now by rule you don't have to, and I'm not going to encourage anybody to stop doing this if you are doing it, but you don't have to send in those incident reports to the county board. Technically by rule, you just have to keep your log and then send those logs in monthly or quarterly, and then I can look at those. But we are a small county and we can keep on top of that. Like, I can look at them, all the SSAs are looking at them, and we work as a team to catch those things so that you don't miss anything. It's definitely a benefit for the providers to send them in every day so we know them. Otherwise, like I know ICS, they don't do that. They don't send me every incident report, but they'll let me know when they have something that could potentially be an MUI. So they can gladly send me everyone if they want to. Most of the ICS, that's just, they never really historically have. Yeah.
Is there like a list for notifications of other providers? I mean, I know and the new ISPs are great, but like for example, ISS, I wouldn't know who to send an email to.
I don't know. We have our master list and stuff, but I think if we can work with the SSAs to make sure that all the providers know. I mean, the ISPs really should cover, or if somebody's getting a new provider, you should be knowing that who they are.
Yeah, like with these new ISPs, that front page is fantastic. It lists like everybody's whatever, but like I don't know who the contact person would be. Like obviously steps.
Like who they are for ECI, who the contact person is.
Steps, yeah. We have one email for everybody, and that's great. But like I don't know any other companies how they do their thing and who I would send an email to.
Because when I send out, I'm sure if you are not getting any emails from me at some point or another, make sure that we are writing that down, because I want to get you on that list, because I send out health and safety alerts to all the providers, because technically you're supposed to be reviewing them as they come out. So I send them out to the providers, the contact that might be on my list, and then they should be sending them out to their staff, just, you know, if they're not doing that already. So if you're not ever getting those emails from me or whatever, let me know. But that provider list are all my MUI contacts for incidents. So if, like, you guys would be on that, I think most everybody would be on it, but I can put something together to say, and just send it out to everybody so they know who to send that out, if that person has one reads or if they have steps, who that should be going to. That'd be a good idea. So yeah, just trying to keep the loop in with everything. I'm still seeing it happen a lot where we're not communicating amongst the providers, and that's lacking. We all need to know what's kind of going on. Everything else, I mean, everything we talked about doesn't matter if they make it an MUI or not. It should still be on an incident report. I don't think we're having any kind of issues with that. Making sure we're reporting things. Don't think it, just because it's not a big deal or you fixed it right away, you still want to write it up, because it still could be something that we need to follow out. If you're having that problem there, we need to know maybe they're having that problem at day programming too. So making sure we're writing up things. Anything that's unusual. It could be they fell. I mean, those are always, I say this every single time, making sure that we're writing up things. They tripped and they fell, they're completely fine. You don't see anything, still writing it up. You're going to see injuries most time, or we're not going to know what they are. We know what happened and we know there's something, and Makes it a whole lot easier than trying to guess that something happened or that something, and say something happens in the morning, you know, you had an incident where they fell in the morning, you can't let that provider, you know, it's going to be a little bit before you get that incident report. Letting the person who know that just picked them up say, this just happened, it looks fine, I'm going to write an incident report, but can you please then let the next person know, the transportation is dropping them off at MAC, let them know that this just happened. So then everybody is assuming someone comes in and said, you know, they got, you know, so-and-so hit me or whatever, that we'll try to pass that message on. Communication is really important. All on the same team, not saying that, oh, that staff must have did something or whatever, just making sure we know so we can address it right away. Obviously, and that's why I said that's more important. Your immediate action, making sure you're communicating, that's way more important than getting that incident report done. You know, it's important, but I mean, making sure you're calling and communicating that, making sure that person's safe and we're getting them treatment. With your incident reports, the rule says that the providers are responsible for investigating their unusual incident reports. That's actually in the rule. So you have to have a prevention plan for every incident report. And that's kind of on the bottom of the incident report too, but it's identifying those causing contributing factors. So that's going to be on your log. I think that's all. Everybody's log should have causing contributing factor. That's in the rule that you have to have that. So if you need a different log, if that's not on there, I can send you a blank one for those, but I don't think I've seen that because I'm looking at the logs you're sending me and I'm not seeing that that's an issue. But making sure that you are investigating that, so it's going to be some type of documentation that how you address that incident, how you're going to try to prevent it from happening. Same thing for the independent providers. Trends and pattern review, that's what I was talking about with their logs that you're sending in to me. I ask for them monthly. By rule, it's quarterly. Some providers do send them quarterly. I like to have them monthly, again, because I can look through them, make sure that you are following the rule, and that so when you're reviewed that you have all those things in place. I'm getting the incident reports every day, so that's what makes it nice, because I already know what those incident reports are about. So when I'm looking at the log, I already know I'm not missing something. Those logs are important for counties that don't have those people interview, or IAs that look at the incident reports, because I'm going to see things and be like, what about this one? What about this one? What about this one? It's so nice that we take care of it at the front level. Again, we're a small county, so we can address those things sooner. I think everybody sends their logs in. Great. I know even if you have nothing, I have 700 providers every month that's just sending me with zero. It still keeps you in compliance, and you need to send them. The abuser registry, if any of the independent providers or anybody I've had the abuser registry, you need to have this in your personnel file every year that you reviewed the abuser registry rule and signed it. So if you need a copy of these, just take that and sign that and put that in, keep that in yours. I know that's more applicable for the independent providers or I know agencies. Make sure they do that. So if you need that, make sure you're having that abuser registry. If you're found to have committed abuse, neglect, misappropriation, the state reviews it, my investigations, and then if they think that that constitutes being put on the abuser registry, that name will be put on the abuser registry, and you are on there for a minimum of 5 years. I think they're changing that you can appeal it after a year, but no one's really ever came off after appealing. It's hard to get off of it. As you know, with the abuser registry, once you're on it, or once you employ anybody, you need to check that first. That's a requirement. You can't hire anybody without checking that abuser registry beforehand. Bill of Rights. I also have annually you need to review the Bill of Rights. So if any of the independent providers need this, I'm using our county board copy. You can keep that in your files if you need that. Just that you're reviewing the Bill of Rights every year and signing them as appropriate. Health and welfare alerts. Again, if you are not getting emails from me, make sure I have your email address before you leave so I can put you on my provider list. You are required to look at the health and safety alerts as they come out and then annually, but if you're looking at them as you go and you're looking, you don't have to go through them all every year. So I send them out to all the providers, share them with your staff, make sure that they're reviewing them and looking at them. Whenever there's a choking incident, if somebody needed to use the Heimlich, I'm asking that they review, the state wants us to have them review the health and safety alert on choking. So usually I'll prompt that, say, can you have retrained staff on that, have them look at that. Choking is a big deal. Every year they have individuals that die from the choking, and a lot of times it's because of the diet textures not being followed. So, okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about misappropriation just in general. It's not really going to be like a training on the money management rule. I think that's not my rule, the money management one. I think that we don't have an issue with how the money management rule is being followed. It's just misappropriation is constantly a trend. It's something that's very hard to prevent completely, because in the home specifically, and just you have one staff working with them, and then it's very hard to manage the funds and the money in the home. So it's kind of been something that I've been paying a little bit more attention on. I want to try to work with some providers on maybe a different way that we can do that. I don't know if it'll work or not, but just trying to, so this is more kind of seeking out to some information from you, if you can share it. There's an increase in unknown PBIs, and that's not a good thing. We don't want to, a lot of times I have an unknown PBI being the person who did it, the primary person involved. We know the money's missing, we know it was stolen. I don't care if it's $23 or $1.84, we know it's missing. We don't think it's a booking error. Most likely it was taken, but everybody had access to it in a period of time. It could have been anybody. So I'm ending these with unknown PBIs, and that's not a good thing, because we want to, that's a pattern and trend for the provider as well. Why do we not know who's doing this? Why can't we find it? Even if they're doing it 1 time or 10 times, we need to tighten up that and try to figure out how we can prevent that and not have these unknown PBIs. I know it's a staff, because it had to be a staff person, because they're the only ones that would have taken it. There's nowhere else. It's staff, but it's 5 different staff. And I mean, I've had these in the homes where it's like the same home, vacuum cleaner went missing, a little bit of the frozen meat went missing, the pods for laundry was coming out missing. They're taking little things all the time. It's staff, we know it is, but I don't know which one. And keeping track of all that is hard. How do you keep track of laundry iPods or whatever? You're going to count them every time? I mean, you can't do that. And I mean, and sadly, it's a trust factor, and it's probably never going to stop, unfortunately. Medications are huge for me, because I know for a fact I had one where this lady should have been getting, she's paraplegic, she had a lot of discomfort and pain. She should be getting pain medications 3 times a day. She should have been getting that for the last 10 years. Was an independent provider, switched out. She got, for some reason or whatever, the new provider that came in gave her pill. It wiped her out, knocked her out. She wasn't getting her pain medications. There's no way. She wouldn't have reacted that way to a minimal amount that she was supposed to be getting 3 times a day. So, and that's huge. Pain medications are very desirable. So how do I know that that person really got it? Even that one time. They may not taking it all the time, but then I can say they gave it to him and take the pill. I mean, and I'm just, how do you prevent that? I mean, it's hard, but it's happening, and I know it's happening. The groceries are huge, too. Going out shopping, buying extra milk, extra napkins and things like that, and then taking that home. I highly recommend not filling someone's freezer with meat, because how do you track that that's been used? I mean, how do you know? I mean, that person that's in the home all the time, they may see it, that home supervisor knows, I know we have more meat in this, but it's slowly happened. How do we know when? So I mean, that's part of the problem with misappropriation. We have multiple sources of theft, multiple accesses, and making that sharp and concise is hard to do. There's reasons why, the increase of the drug epidemic, that's affecting everybody, and checks and balances may be in place, but they may not be in place enough. We're having cash in the home, but you're only counting it once a week. It's not enough. I mean, I know that that's hard, and some homes can't do that, but does it need to be every day? I mean, yeah, I think it does, but some homes don't do that. So when we do have misappropriations, we're going to look at prevention planning, and that needs to be something, if you're implementing as an agency, or, and I know this may not be always applicable, but if you're implementing a prevention plan for one home, it needs to be something that you can use agency-wide. If it's something you identify in one home, it should be something you try to do in all the homes. because that's going to help you prevent that with others. So you don't want to be treating one home better than the other just because they've never had an issue and that staff has been there forever and they're great and you know that they're going to be on top of it. That's dangerous, because at any time that staff could have something going on in their life where they start slipping. And that's happened before in our county to one of our dear provider that had been around for a long time. She was a home supervisor of many homes, and she was awesome. She was always the one going out. If somebody came missing, she's loading up her kids and searching for them. She did the best that she could do. I always thought she was great. For the last 9 years, she had been taking the individual's funds for groceries for a good 9 years. And it was somebody, if you've seen the paper or whatever, you probably know who that was. And it doesn't make her a bad person. I mean, she messed up for sure, but it became easy. Started doing it, and it just becomes easier. It becomes easier and easier, and then by the time you catch it, and she's a felony on her record. I mean, so it can happen. I mean, even to most of our staff that we think that and taking, and I say all the time where you stop in the home and if you stop in there unannounced, count their funds, that they were borrowing money and putting it back. But when does it start where then they can't start putting it back? You know, they're borrowing and then putting it back. So when are you doing those audits? Those, you know, case managers stopping into homes, you know, that's good. I mean, you're not always going to prevent it, but they know those checks and balances aren't always the same. You're not doing those monthly audits always at the first of the month. They know to get their stuff together, sorry. They know to get it together before the first, because that's when they have to turn everything in. Preventing that, I mean, they shouldn't have to be scared that when you're going to stop in it, but that helps. If they're fearful of the consequences, then they're more likely not to do that. So stopping in randomly when they're supposed to be getting their aren't following through and they're not paying the bills on time, so there's late fees. And then late fees, the individual's not responsible for the late fees, so the provider then has to pay for those late fees. So that's an expense if they're not managing that right. But we have people doing checkbooks that don't even know, they've never even balanced their own checkbook. So it's difficult and confusing to them. Something that might be simple to us isn't to them. So a red flag may be that the utilities it's not getting flagged necessarily in utility because something's being paid. Maybe they're paying small amounts of the utilities a month. Why would they need to do that? Because maybe they don't have enough, so they just pay a little bit on it. I mean, that's going to be caught eventually, but it's easier to see why that would happen now. Oh, why would you just pay $20 of the $45 that's due? There's a reason why they're doing that. Or they're paying smaller amounts, smaller dollar amounts, or paying every other month, so that keeps them from getting the services shut off, or keeps them maybe from it. A lot of utility companies won't charge the late fees if you pay every other month. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. A lot of extra eating out, they can do that, but then there's no reduction in their grocery bill. They should be purchasing all the same amount of groceries if they're going out to eat all the time. That's something kind of red flag. Bonus expenses, I don't know if anybody has like long distance charges anymore. In the homes, it's just a thing. So that was one before, like if, okay, say, for instance, they have a service on their phone service, whether it be long distance or whatever, but they never use that. Why do they need that? They don't need that. Is that for staff convenience? Are they using the phone for the long distance? That sort of thing. I know it's really not applicable anymore with the cell phones, but Netflix, maybe they have Netflix. Do they really watch Netflix, or is that staff convenience? Are the individuals paying for that, or so like those kind of things? That's misappropriation. If we're having an individual pay for a service and then they don't need it, don't use it. If it's just to watch a movie every now and then, rent it from the library or something, rather than having expense. And what are the movie rentals that they're getting? Is it something that's really appropriate for them, something that they're watching, or is it staff picking it out? I mean, that's another form of misappropriation if it's a rental that's being paid for by the individual. Food stamps, anytime they have food stamps, it has to be in the plan. If it's not in the plan, that's an issue. That has to be addressed because that has to be tracked on a ledger. And I actually talked to Destiny a little bit to help me understand on food stamps, because she said that the rule kind of went, and if you correct me if I'm wrong, but that it's pretty clear cut that you can't share food. If they get food stamps, it cannot be shared, period. It has to be just for them. So they cannot share it at all by rule with anybody. Regardless if they're going to check or not, it's still against the rule. and against the law for them to share that. So if you have individuals with multiple people and someone has food stamps and the other two don't, it has to be very specific to them and that person only. Food stamps are easily misappropriated, very easily. You can't reimburse that individual with money. That's a federal Medicaid offense. That's like people sell their food stamps, and that would be considered something like that. So they have food stamps, making sure that there is a ledger for that and keeping track of that as well. And I do believe that there's an online thing that makes that pretty easy. Destiny said that you can manage that online. You can see what they're doing, so that kind of helps maybe staff from budgeting that or balancing that ledger. Grocery receipts, I know that's hard. That's coming on your end too, making sure you're looking at those grocery receipts, making sure it makes sense. Why do they need 3 gallons of milk? Do they really need 3 gallons of milk? Maybe sometime a good check and balance would be look at that and then go in the home the next day and see if that's there. You know, not that you're trying to catch people, but it's just making them know that, hey, we are looking at this, because we don't want it to become that 9-year problem that we found with somebody that kept going on. Very hard to find, and I wouldn't have found it if it weren't for Facebook and things that were being done on that way. So I don't want to discourage people from posting on Facebook, because it helps me sometimes. But yeah, I mean, that may be a good thing, just looking at that, making sure that what's being purchased is appropriate for their diet textures or appropriate for them. They can get what they want. Of course, if they're diabetic and they have cupcakes on it, it doesn't mean somebody's taking it, but it's like, we need to just make sure that that's happening, because I know that honestly, that is a huge one that I know that I can't catch unless I see the receipts, and it's circumstantial. You can't prove that. You could by stopping in, why isn't this stuff in the home, and ask for an explanation. We've had home supervisors do that. All the groceries in the back, and they unload and leave in their car what's theirs purchased for the individual. So yeah, just reviewing those receipts are really important. Staff eating food, I mean, that's misappropriation. If the staff are fixing food and then eating it themselves, that's misappropriation. That's, or they're making larger amounts and then taking leftovers home. I know, and that's what we want to do to support our staff and stuff more. If they're in hardships with that, we're just trying to provide other things that might help those staff, so they're not put in those positions. I'm not out there to catch them. We want to help staff not be put in these positions, because this isn't, we all know we're not getting rich in this job, and no one ever is going to. So it's hard working on $9, $10 an hour, and they can't feed their own kids. So we are trying to get on that bag, where we can encourage staff to access different resources that the county board might be able to help, so they're not in these positions where they're finding themselves in with a felony when they were making $9 an hour, and now they have a felony on their record for taking a gallon of milk home. I mean, so we want to help them. I'm not out there to get them. I want to help them and see them not be put in those positions as well. So we should never be accepting handwritten receipts. I know there's times where you can't find that receipt and you're going to have to do that, but at no time should staff be turning in just a handwritten receipt like Wendy's $7.25 or whatever. It should be an actual receipt from a place. If it needs to be split, you can copy that. I don't think that's too much an issue, but not taking handwritten receipts is always going to create an issue. Other medication red flags, a lot of times we don't know what medications the staff are taking, but it could be a red flag if you have staff and individuals taking the same medications. If you find that out, the card punched out with the wrong dates and order, I kind of said that, the seal's broken. It's always something to look at. If you have an individual that has a medication change, maybe they were on a prescription pain medication and now they're supposed to be taking Tylenol over the counter, making sure you dispose of that medication that was in there, making sure it's secure. Not everybody should not have access to medications, especially the scheduled drugs, you know, the pain medications and things like that. If you can safeguard those more, those really need to be safeguarded. And again, that's hard to do sometimes, but looking at that and seeing what you could do differently is always good. Don't do it the same way just because it's always worked. So that was where I said, like, with the provider staff and the administrative staff, who's managing the money. it's going to be a lot of times, it's going to be the provider staff that are doing that money management in the homes, and having that oversight is important. I think almost every homes have cash in the home still, or the individual. I mean, it's nice when the individual is responsible for that. We still want to try to help them so they're not having that taken from them, but I hate cash in the home. I don't know, I would love to see a way to do cashless in the home, and I don't know that that's quite there yet, but I think of it, when do we really need cash that we can't use a card for or something like that? I mean, they need a gallon a month, they have a card, the cards are locked up, the cash is just so easy. I mean, cards can be stolen and debit cards can be stolen and stuff like that too, but I just feel like that might be safeguarded better if it wasn't cash, even small amounts. Because then again, you have that, counting that all the time, maybe $20, but it's still valuable to somebody. So I mean, it's kind of like what I don't know how we really get there with the cashless, but.
What about if you're in a situation where you just want to go to the store to get, you know, a pop and a candy bar, but yet that station will charge you 50 cents if it's not, if they have a card?
Because it's not to a certain amount?
Right, correct. I mean, I know my personal card, I mean, not that any of our people have it. I know I can get charged 50 cents if I don't spend up to $5.
So that's where I think that.
Or $10. So I mean, how do you, I mean.
Or you have to have at least $45 to be able to use the card.
Right,
I think that that's something with working with the banks, is finding a card that they wouldn't do that. Maybe the banks that would be willing to do that.
It's the gas stations. It's the gas stations, because that's when I use mine. I mean, if I don't spend so much money, because I don't like having cash on me because I spend it. So I like my debit card, but there's some places I know I'll just want to get a bottle of water or something, and
even to use a debit card, it costs that extra.
It doesn't matter.
Business for every transaction they do, so if they don't get a certain dollar amount for the total cost, then they're basically losing out.
I would honestly say from Norwalk and I go to Sandusky, 75 to 80% of the stores that I use, I'm going to spend up to $5. It's an automatic 50-cent charge.
I guess and that makes sense, and those are things that like I need to think about, because I don't think through those what would prevent us from becoming cashless. But maybe if it was a way to start with homes that don't have those situations, or
and the thing I like is our house managers do a good job of keeping so much cash on hand. It's not like our people have a lot of cash. I think most of the time, $15 I think is most cash they have.
And those are what I'm getting misappropriation from, those low amounts. So that still is being misappropriated, because having just the home, I have a couple homes where they have just the home supervisor that's responsible. It was a problem home where I kept having the laundry and the little bit of money here missing and whatever. Only the home manager had access to this lock cabinet or whatever. But anytime the staff needed something, she had to run over there every time, and that's just not feasible. We can't expect someone to be available 24 hours a day because they need $4.
That's
right.
For us. Whoever's on at that time pays what it does, what they always have. When you come on, you count the money, and you count the money. So
it would be nice if we had some type of, I don't know, system thing where in order to open that lockbox, you know, you had to put the code in, so every person had their own code, kind of like to get into the building. The master person's going to know when I entered the building because I had to punch in my code. So the same thing with like the lockboxes, something like that. We do that, but then that register that they put that back, you know, or it's this, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a robotic system that would work, but
I mean, it's no matter what, you're in a tough situation.
yeah. I mean, anymore, I think you can use a card anywhere, but again, those fees aren't, that's not, you know, close to that. So, lock boxes, I still think that kind of sometimes is a joke, because who could just come in and take that out?
Pick it up and go.
I mean, and they're so easy to pop open. Half the time, I mean, they're a joke. You know, so I'd say we all know where the key is. They put it in the same spot. You know, it used to be pretty generic where they put the key right above there and put it off, put it back. That keeps the individual out of it. So, I mean, what about everybody else who just pick up the lockbox and take it home and pop it open? So yeah, lockboxes aren't always the answer. By saying they need a lockbox, well, how is it a secure thing that somebody can't take it out of the home? Most likely it's not.
cashless, I think the biggest question that I might have, because I don't even carry cash 90% of the time, so I get it. But we have a lot of shared settings where you're gonna have 3 people who are supposed to split the expense of one big grocery trip. That's the one situation where I can think of, holy crap, I'm sitting at the checkout in Walmart and I've gotta do the math right now and run 3 cars. Other than that,
What, and then taking the cash out of each person's thing?
Yep. Because a lot of times, you know, you have, say it's 180, so you've taken 180 from the house, or 200, you take the change back, divide it up, and give each person back their change. You're not necessarily pulling from 3 separate envelopes.
And that's where a lot of the errors are coming though too. They didn't quite count that the right way, and then somebody else got more, and then like that, just the transactional money, I think sometimes is where that happens.
And that's one thing I like about what we do, and I'm sure you guys probably do it the same way. Whoever takes it, and then once a week we have our house manager look at it, and then it comes to us. So it's like check 3 times before it ever gets, you know what I mean, before it goes too far. So I mean, we do that. The reason why we like our people doing it is because now you're held accountable for everybody. You can see what people are doing.
Yeah.
It's easier to catch.
What we do isn't error-free because sometimes when the grocery line's long or the people you're supervising are starting to get antsy or whatever, there's mistakes there where people have to reimburse, but they take the 3 people's checkbooks, say, and say, you know, put $63.22 on this person, and that person, or
Right.
maybe they took their phone and figured out what the total was and go. The only time it gets really bad is when one person has food stamps left, and 2 people don't,
Yep.
and some people have taxes.
You know how that's gets to get the people behind
Well,
you.
and that, we were struggling with the food stamp thing too. That's why we started, we met with JFS. Because going backwards, everybody's made some mistakes, including us, and we were finding that if you took 2 people and one had food stamps, and you'd swipe that food stamp card, it was reducing the tax, so the amount wasn't even anymore. Well, then when you speak with JFS, we don't split a receipt anymore. They shouldn't share a receipt. So it actually took that problem off the table for us. But the math in the checkout, when you have 2 to 3 people, all of these groceries, maybe some personal items that don't belong in the whole bunch, it is stressful.
Plus now it's like they cut all the lines down to 3. You got so many people behind you too rushing, and
Yes.
the cash register.
They're not giving our stamp like they do.
Because I encourage you to use checks. Use a check. Stay away from cash. You know, you're going grocery shopping, use the checkbooks instead of the cash.
Right.
But then you have people behind you waiting for checks.
Yeah, that's stressful, and you have the individuals with you at the same time. I can't do all that at once and do it right. When you have 3 different people, you have to split.
I know,
That's not fair.
like Ann, what she does, when a roommate setting, like roommate A will pay 1 week, roommate B pays the 2nd week, roommate A pays the 3rd week, like every other, so you're not taking money from 2 accounts, it's just one's responsible this week, one's responsible the next week.
And they actually advise in the rule not to do that.
Okay, so
Yeah, no, that's a good example, but they're just paying attention to that. You shouldn't be cleaning, because what if next month that's not going to be
Sure.
accurate to the other one? So, and she may have the process where she
Right.
knows how that's
I was
fair.
going to say,
Yeah.
knowing Ann, she's probably got
Oh,
the
without a doubt.
process.
Without a doubt, and that's the thing, she
Right.
has like her stuff thing, so like, but having somebody pay for groceries this month and then the next month they pay for it, we really want to be splitting it every month the same way.
Yeah, but it's like, it's weekly, but,
Or, right,
yeah.
but if they're buying the same exact thing and you know for a fact they're gonna buy the
Sure.
same exact thing and it is even,
Yeah.
but that's where that problem could be, and if somebody came in and audited and said like, well, that's really not fair, because really over time, this person's paid this much more than that person
Sure.
because you're taking turns. We're gonna split it 3 ways. But then you have the complex thing where you have somebody who's just living there on the weekends and then they only contribute so much, and so it's
Yeah.
not gonna be clear cut on any home, it just depends on the circumstances of that home, but and that's the thing, it's nice to be able to take that stress off of those home supervisors or any of the staff to have to manage that without errors and not being accused of doing it purposely. Most of the time that's not purposely, but then it comes back on the provider to have to fix that because it hasn't been split the right way. So yeah, I don't know if we'll ever quite be there. I do have like some thoughts in mind about how it might make it easier for some homes, but again, it might not be applicable for everybody. So management and oversight, that is really important. I know that some people just stop into the homes, or they every month they goes to the office and they look at that. But it might be a good thing just for practices, just to change that up, not have it at the first of the month. That may not be possible or not, but it's just something to look at for ones that have that money in the home. And I'm sorry that this isn't applicable to everybody in here, but it's a hard thing to do. So maybe varying those practices might help. Ledgers, like, I know it would be nice if every home kind of had like an iPad or something like software that did that for them so they weren't having to add that all up. Something that stayed in the home where they come in and they put it in and it adds it for them. I mean, Excel will do that stuff for you, so they're not making those errors. But we have to have gift cards. All gift cards have to have a ledger. No, there should be no gift cards that the providers or the staff are handling. Now, if an individual is allowed to keep that gift card, then that's fine. But any kind of staff responsibility to keep that you need to have that ledger for that. Food stamps has to have one. And this is, again, where it gets so much for that home staff to do. They have to keep the ledger for the gift card, for the personal spending, for the house funds, for the groceries, and then they have one, and then they have three. And it's like, I'd love to simplify this a little bit, and I don't know that we can, but kind of some things that we're thinking of. And so the input is really helping to try to brainstorm on something that might help. So I think that we're kind of, it's kind of been a topic that's brought up by some of the providers that maybe like a financial piece training would help staff on home side, like on how to budget, but again, they gotta want to go, forcing them to go to a budgeting training, are they really going to get something from that or not? I don't know, but I mean, if it's something that you think that maybe your home supervisor would benefit on, that maybe we need to have something that's available outside of the providers, so it's not just the providers providing all the training all the time on budgeting or balancing checkbooks. I mean, math skills are hard for somebody. I mean, I can't count how many I have, because I can't count them. So, I mean, it just, yeah.
I guess I tracked for a second, but I had a question when you were back on the last screen about if anybody in here has a house that they're doing a grocery ledger for outside of a individual cash ledger, it'd really be beneficial to me to see how somebody else does that.
Because your ledgers are together?
Well, no, we keep an individual cash ledger for each person in the home. But I have one specific home where each guardian would like to see how the groceries are being divided. So they wanted one grocery ledger that they can see Cindy, Stephanie, and Jessica contributed this at the beginning of the month, and then this is where they spent it together. And I haven't found a great form or a great way to do that. We're kind of winging it and would like something
Because I mean,
better than what we
I've
have.
seen some, and I don't know if that's one of you have where you have like the groceries are on a house fund, so everybody puts the $100 in, and
Yes.
then that's all that keeps track of.
Yes.
And your problem with that is that you can provide that to guardians, though, can't you? Or
Yeah,
because
we
it
just
doesn't have
don't
the,
have a specific form
Like the
for it.
breakdown. You're talking about, I mean, you can look there and say, here's meats, cans, and all this stuff, but, you know, not everybody eats the same food, so. I mean,
No,
break down
but they
that
just want to see the ones that they split, but I don't have a form for that, so we're using another form that, crossing this out to make it work for the columns that you need. Because they don't need to see where Cindy spent all of her money to share with Stephanie. They only want to see where they shared groceries. And I'm not used to having to provide that. I only have one home that's asking for it, because normally all of those expenses are going to be on a cash ledger that goes to the SSA, and it's not typical that I have somebody ask to see where they're spending that money together.
the only places, I mean, it may be beneficial for, if whatever they are splitting, that's a separate one too, that's just.
Well, and that's what's being done, but I think from an outside perspective, they don't realize you're asking someone to do double documentation again, because not only does she have to show that on Kroger, Cindy spent $35 here on a grocery ledger, she has to go back to the cash ledger and put that at Kroger, I spent $35 for Cindy. So you're asking someone to double, triple, quadruple document when you've got to do that with 3
And then
people.
like all these ledgers and stuff like that, it's just
When they
one more.
already
I mean,
have 5 or 6 ledgers.
Right. I don't know, does anybody have like a separate one, or, and I know Ann doesn't have, like, Steph doesn't have a lot of people where they share that. I think there are a lot of.
Yeah, most of our folks are, just the married couples and such.
That's something we can brainstorm on too, right?
Yeah.
So But, I mean, this wasn't really a training on money management, rather than just try to, like, I liked how we're sharing that stuff. That's how, the only way we're gonna get better at this is by sharing what others are doing, and, some of the problems I'm having with one agency, or not the agency, but red flags I'm seeing with one. If we don't share those amongst each other, we're not gonna know that that's something that you could look out for. So that's a work in progress with this, the finances and things like that. Like I said, I'm trying to work with some agencies on exploring and trying different things and seeing what that would work. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it would work, but I think trying it might help. But we're always going to have those situations that aren't going to work, and every situation is different.